Millionaire humiliated his wife in front of his entire family. What his daughter said next left him pale. Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty pour his endless blessings on you, filling your days with joy, your nights with peace, and your hearts with overflowing love. May every challenge become strength, every tear turn into a smile, and may you always walk protected. Amen. If you're here with me now, please comment present. If you feel our strong bond, comment I am with Mr. Peter. Thank you for your beautiful response. To my new family members, please trust your storyteller and brother. Don't leave now. Watch this story till the end. I promise you will enjoy every moment. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every like and comment is a heartbeat that keeps this family alive. The chandeliers cast their judgment like 1,000 watching eyes, and Rachel Christensen knew tonight would change everything. From her hidden position on the marble balcony of the Grand Belmont Hotel, the 9-year-old girl watched the charity gala unfold below like a glittering chess game. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her father, Hayden Christensen, had left her with the nanny again, declaring that children had no place at society events. But Rachel had learned long ago that the most important moments happened when adults thought no one was watching. She pressed herself against the cold balustrade, her small fingers gripping the edge as she spotted her target. There, Elisha Cuthbert moved through the crowd like liquid grace, her deep purple gown complementing her rich brown skin that seemed to glow under the warm lights. Even from this distance, Rachel could see what her father had tried so hard to destroy: dignity, strength, and an unbreakable spirit. Elisha was checking the final arrangements for the auction, her tablet in hand, directing the staff with quiet efficiency. As the city's most sought-after luxury event designer, she had transformed the ballroom into a masterpiece of elegance. Hanging gardens cascaded from the ceiling, their white orchids and silver leaves creating an ethereal canopy. Each table setting was a work of art, with hand-blown glass centerpieces that caught and reflected light like captured stars. Rachel's chest tightened as she watched the woman who had once been her stepmother, the only person who had ever braided her hair with patient hands, who had read her stories even when Hayden demanded she attend to his needs instead. The woman her father had discarded like yesterday's newspaper when Scarlett Beaumont had walked into his office with her 24-year-old smile and her father's investment portfolio. The memory burned. Elisha packing her things while Hayden laughed on the phone with his lawyer, boasting about how he'd hidden assets, how she'd get nothing, how she'd never amount to anything without his name and connections. Rachel had been 6 then, watching from the stairs as Elisha had looked up, seen her, and mouthed the words that had sustained Rachel through 3 years of loneliness. "Be strong, baby girl." A commotion below drew Rachel's attention. Her father had arrived. Hayden Christensen entered the ballroom like he owned it, which Rachel knew he practically did through various shell companies and intimidation tactics. At 38, he still cut an imposing figure in his 3-piece suit, his blonde hair perfectly styled, his blue eyes scanning the room with predatory assessment. On his arm, Scarlett giggled at something he whispered, her red dress designed to ensure every eye followed her movements. Rachel watched her father work the room, shaking hands with the mayor, clapping the district attorney on the shoulder, kissing the cheeks of society wives who whispered behind their fans about his scandalous divorce. He was in his element, the puppet master pulling strings, unaware that his own daughter had been documenting every cruel word, every shady deal, every moment of his true nature. The auction was about to begin when it happened. Elisha took the stage to introduce the evening's proceedings, her voice clear and professional as she thanked the sponsors and outlined the cause, a new wing for the Children's Hospital. She was radiant, confident, in complete control of the moment. That's when Hayden struck. "Well, well," his voice boomed across the ballroom, deliberately loud, deliberately cruel. Elisha Cuthbert, everyone. From cleaning my house to, what is it you call yourself now? An event designer? He laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. I suppose we should applaud her journey from maid to whatever this is. The ballroom fell silent. 500 of the city's most influential people turned to stare. Elisha's hand stilled on the microphone, but she didn't flinch. Rachel pulled out her phone, already recording, her young fingers steady despite her racing heart. Tell me, Elisha, Hayden continued, emboldened by the attention, by Scarlett's tittering laugh beside him. Did you design this event the same way you designed our marriage? All surface beauty, with nothing substantial underneath? Though I suppose you've had practice now. How many divorces fuel your little business? Do desperate women hire you hoping you'll teach them how to gold dig as effectively as you tried to? Several people gasped. The mayor's wife covered her mouth, but Hayden wasn't finished. Ladies and gentlemen, let this be a lesson. He raised his champagne glass mockingly. This is what happens when you elevate people beyond their station. You can dress them up, give them opportunities, but breeding always tells. Isn't that right, Elisha? You can take the girl out of the projects, but you can't take the projects out of the girl. Elisha's voice cut through his speech like a blade through silk. She stepped forward, and somehow, impossibly, she seemed to grow taller, more luminous. Is that what you were going to say, Hayden? The same thing you said the night you backhanded me for outshining you at the partners' dinner. Or was it what you said when you forged my signature on the post-nuptial agreement? The silence deepened, became something living, breathing. Elisha descended from the stage, each step measured, regal. You want to discuss breeding? Let's discuss it. My mother was a nurse who worked 3 jobs to put herself through school. My father was a teacher who believed education could change the world. They taught me that character isn't inherited, it's chosen, every single day. She stood directly in front of him now, and Rachel could see her father's hand trembling slightly around his champagne flute. You're right about one thing, though, Elisha continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. I did rise above my station, the station of being your wife, your victim, your convenient target. And yes, my business is built on helping women rebuild after men like you try to destroy them. There are 17 women in this room alone who have hired me. Would you like to know why? Hayden's face had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Because I don't just design events, Hayden. I design resurrections. I take the ashes you men leave behind, and I help women rise from them, phoenix after phoenix after phoenix. And every single success, every smile I help create, every woman who stands taller because of what we've built together, that's my revenge. Not against you, because you're not worth that energy, but against the idea that we should stay broken because you tried to break us. She turned to address the room. And in that moment, Rachel saw what her father had tried to destroy and failed. True power, the kind that didn't need cruelty to sustain it. The auction will begin in 5 minutes, Elisha announced calmly. I hope you'll all bid generously. After all, the children we're helping tonight deserve better than the examples some of us set. The room erupted in applause. Not polite society applause, but real, thunderous approval. The mayor's wife started it, standing as she clapped. Then the district attorney's daughter. Then table after table rose to their feet, applauding not just Elisha's words, but her courage, her dignity, her absolute destruction of Hayden Christensen, without raising her voice or lowering herself to his level. Hayden stood frozen, his champagne glass still raised in his mock toast, as the room's approval washed over his ex-wife. Scarlett tugged at his arm, hissing something about leaving, but he seemed rooted to the spot, watching his carefully constructed social dominance crumble in real time. From the balcony, Rachel smiled for the first time in 3 years. She saved the recording, labeled it Evidence File Number 1, and created a new folder on her phone. Operation Phoenix. Her father had made a critical error tonight. He'd reminded Rachel why Elisha deserved justice, and Rachel Christensen, 9 years old and wise beyond her years, had just appointed herself the architect of his destruction. Below, she caught sight of a man she'd seen at other events, Grayson Whitmore, the billionaire philanthropist who always seemed to donate wherever Elisha worked. He was watching Elisha with something that looked like admiration mixed with longing. Rachel filed that information away too. Her plan would need allies. As the auction began, and Elisha returned to her work with unshaken professionalism, Rachel slipped back through the service corridors she'd memorized weeks ago. She had work to do, evidence to gather, and a woman to avenge who didn't even know she had a guardian angel. The nanny would never notice she'd been gone. Her father wouldn't check on her tonight. He never did after public humiliations, preferring to rage at household staff or drink himself into oblivion. But Rachel would remember everything. She would document everything, because daughters of cruel men learned to be patient, and tonight, the real game had finally begun. Chapter 2. The Daughter's Strategic Move. 3 weeks had passed since the gala, and Rachel Christensen sat at her computer at 3 a.m., executing the most delicate phase of her plan while the house slept around her. The mansion felt like a mausoleum at this hour, all marble edges and cold surfaces that had never known the warmth of a real home. Her father's interior designer, the third one this year, had decorated everything in shades of white and grey, what Scarlett called minimalist chic, but what Rachel recognized as soulless emptiness. Even her own room felt like a hotel suite, nothing like the cozy space Elisha had created for her years ago with hand. Painted murals and shelves full of books that weren't just for show. Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard with the skill of someone who'd been teaching herself to code since age 7. Another secret her father didn't know. The venue cancellation had been easy. She'd simply called the Riverside Country Club, pretending to be Scarlett's assistant, claiming a scheduling conflict. The caterers had been trickier, but Rachel had learned to perfectly mimic Scarlett's Valley Girl accent and entitled tone. "Oh my God, did Hayden not tell you? We're totally going in a different direction. Yeah, cancel everything. We'll call you." The final touch had been the leak to the society blogger, Penelope Worthington's daughter, suggesting that the Christensen-Beaumont engagement party was in chaos. Nothing sells papers like rich people's disasters. Now, Rachel pulled up Elisha's contact information, not from her father's phone, which would leave a trace, but from the business card she'd stolen from the gala's registration desk. Her hands trembled slightly as she composed the email from a fake account she'd created to look like Scarlett's personal assistant. "Ms. Cuthbert," she typed, "I'm reaching out on behalf of the Christensen-Beaumont family regarding an urgent matter. The engagement party scheduled for this Saturday has encountered severe complications. Miss Beaumont specifically requested your services, having witnessed your exceptional work at the Belmont Gala. She insists only you can salvage this situation. Please respond at your earliest convenience." Rachel hesitated before hitting send. Was she being cruel, forcing Elisha back into her father's orbit? But then she remembered the recording she'd captured last week, Hayden on the phone with his lawyer, laughing about how he'd hidden assets during the divorce, how Elisha had gotten exactly what she deserved, which was nothing. She hit send. The response came faster than expected at 3:47 a.m. Of course Elisha would be awake. Rachel remembered she always worked late, planning every detail to perfection. The response was professional but guarded. "Thank you for reaching out. However, I believe there may be some confusion. My schedule is fully committed for this weekend. I can recommend several excellent alternatives." Rachel smiled grimly and executed Phase 2. She called the house landline from her cell phone, knowing it would wake Scarlett but not her father, who slept with earplugs and an eye mask like the prima donna he was. She heard Scarlett's groggy voice answer from the master bedroom. "Hello? Who the hell is calling at this hour?" Rachel pitched her voice higher, younger, adding an edge of panic she didn't feel. "Scarlett, it's Rachel. I'm so sorry to wake you, but I just got a call from Naomi at the country club. She says the engagement party is cancelled, and the caterers called too. They said you cancelled. But Daddy's entire board is supposed to come, and the Japanese investors—" "What?" Scarlett's voice sharpened from sleepy to shrill in an instant. "I didn't cancel anything. Oh my God, your father is going to kill me. The Yamamoto family is flying in specifically for this." Maybe Elisha could help," Rachel suggested innocently. "I have her card from when she used to live here. She's really good at fixing things fast." "Elisha, your father's ex-wife? Are you insane?" "But she's the best in the city," Rachel pressed, adding a small sniffle for effect. "And if the party fails, Daddy will be so angry. You know how he gets about appearances. Remember what happened to his last fiancée when she embarrassed him at the Derby?" There was a long pause. Rachel could practically hear Scarlett's limited brain cells firing, remembering that Hayden's previous fiancée had been unceremoniously dumped and socially blacklisted after a single public mishap. "Give me her number," Scarlett demanded. Rachel rattled it off, then added the killing blow. "Scarlett, please don't tell Daddy I called. He already thinks I'm useless. If he finds out I knew about the disaster and didn't fix it myself somehow—" "Fine. Whatever. Go back to bed." The line went dead. Rachel counted to 300, then watched on her tablet, connected to the house's security system, as Scarlett crept out of the bedroom and made a call from the terrace. The conversation was everything Rachel had hoped for. Scarlett, desperate and panicked, offered Elisha triple her usual rate. When Elisha hesitated, Scarlett played the card Rachel had planted. "Look, I know there's history, but Hayden doesn't even have to know. I'll handle everything, be your only contact. Please, his daughter even suggested you. She says you're the only one who can pull this off." That last part was the key. Rachel had counted on Elisha's soft spot for her, the maternal instinct that Hayden had mocked as weakness, but Rachel recognized as strength. By 4:30 a.m., it was settled. Elisha would take the job. Rachel deleted all traces of her digital footprints, then pulled out her physical notebook, the one she kept hidden behind a false panel in her closet. She wrote in careful script, Phase 2, complete. E will be here Saturday. Must ensure 1. Hidden cameras in place. 2. Father's reaction recorded. 3. Seeds planted with guests about his business troubles. 4. Grayson Whitmore receives invitation. The last part was crucial. She'd done her research on Whitmore, self-made billionaire, known for ethical business practices, quietly donated millions to women's shelters and educational programs. Most importantly, he'd been photographed watching Elisha at no fewer than 15 events in the past year, always maintaining respectful distance, but clearly interested. Rachel had even hacked into the Society Photographer's cloud storage and found dozens of accidentally deleted photos of Grayson looking at Elisha when he thought no one was watching. The longing in his expression was so pure it made Rachel's chest ache for the mother she'd lost and the love story that might still be possible. She closed the notebook and returned to bed, but not to sleep. Instead, she pulled up the files on her tablet, recordings, photographs, documents she'd been collecting for 3 years. Her father thought she was just a silly child who spent too much time in her room. He had no idea she'd been documenting every crime, every cruelty, every piece of evidence that would eventually destroy him. The sun was rising by the time Rachel finally closed her eyes, her plan perfectly in motion. Tomorrow, she would play the innocent daughter, surprised and delighted to see Elisha. She would watch her father squirm as his ex-wife proved her superiority once again. She would plant more seeds of his destruction while appearing to be nothing more than a lonely child seeking affection. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made the Connecticut countryside look like a postcard. Rachel dressed carefully in the outfit Elisha had bought her 3 years ago, a deep blue dress that her father had tried to throw away, but Rachel had hidden. She wanted Elisha to see she'd kept it, treasured it. She was sitting in the garden when Elisha arrived, deliberately positioned where she could seem surprised, but also where Elisha would see her first, not Hayden or Scarlett. "Rachel?" Elisha's voice was exactly as she remembered, warm honey over steel strength. "Oh my goodness, look how you've grown." Rachel let her carefully constructed walls drop for just a moment, becoming the child she might have been in a different life. She ran to Elisha, threw her arms around her waist, and for a heartbeat allowed herself to feel the maternal warmth she'd been denied for 3 years. "I missed you," she whispered, and meant it. Elisha held her tightly, and Rachel felt the woman's surprise at how thin she'd become, how her designer clothes couldn't hide the sharp angles of a child who often forgot to eat because no one reminded her to. "Baby girl," Elisha murmured, and Rachel heard the concern, the old protectiveness stirring. "Perfect." "Rachel?" Scarlett's sharp voice cut through the moment. "What are you doing? Let Miss Cuthbert work. You have your Mandarin lesson in an hour." "On a Saturday?" Elisha asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Hayden insists she maintain her schedule," Scarlett said dismissively. "Discipline builds character, he says." Rachel saw Elisha's jaw tighten, but her smile remained fixed. "Of course. Rachel, it was wonderful to see you. Perhaps we can catch up later." "I'd like that," Rachel said, letting hope color her voice, while internally noting that Elisha's protective instincts were already engaged. Another piece moved into position on her mental chessboard. The rest of the morning unfolded exactly as Rachel had orchestrated. She watched from various vantage points as Elisha worked her magic, transforming the disaster into something spectacular. The woman commandeered the mansion's staff with quiet authority, had new caterers arriving within hours, and somehow convinced the country club to discover they'd made an error, and the venue was actually available. But the best part was watching her father when he finally emerged from his study at noon, saw Elisha directing operations in his home, and went absolutely rigid with rage. "What the hell is she doing here?" he snarled at Scarlett, loud enough for several arriving vendors to hear. "Saving your engagement party," Elisha said calmly, not even looking up from her tablet. "Your fiancé hired me. If you have concerns, I suggest you discuss them with her. In the meantime, I have 48 hours to create magic from chaos, so if you'll excuse me." She walked past him like he was furniture, leaving Hayden standing there with his mouth open and his face reddening. Rachel recorded it all from the landing above, adding it to her collection. Chapter 3. Invisible Threads. The transformation of the Christensen mansion into an engagement party venue worthy of society pages was nothing short of alchemy, and Rachel watched it all unfold from her strategic hiding spots throughout the house. By Saturday evening, Elisha had worked her particular brand of magic. The cold, sterile mansion had been transformed into something from a dream. Thousands of fairy lights created a constellation across the ceiling of the grand ballroom. Silk draping in cream and gold softened the harsh, modern edges of the space. The gardens, which Scarlett had neglected and Hayden ignored, now bloomed with imported orchids and roses, their perfume mixing with the evening air to create an intoxicating atmosphere. Rachel, dressed in her best behavior and a modest dove-grey dress that made her look younger than her 9 years, stationed herself where she could observe everything. She had cameras rolling in 3 different locations, all disguised as part of her school project on event planning. A lie her father had barely acknowledged with a dismissive wave. The guests began arriving at 7, and Rachel noted with satisfaction that her carefully planted rumors had done their work. She could hear the whispers already. Hayden's ex-wife is running the party. I heard there was some disaster with the original planning. Scarlett must be either very confident or very stupid. But the real victory came when Grayson Whitmore arrived. Rachel had sent him a personal invitation, forging her father's signature and adding a handwritten note. Your presence would mean a great deal to the family, especially to young Rachel, who speaks so highly of your charitable work. Grayson entered like a man who belonged everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, comfortable in his skin, but carrying a loneliness that Rachel recognized because she saw it in the mirror every day. His dark hair was slightly too long for fashion, his suit impeccable, but worn with the carelessness of someone who didn't need clothes to announce his worth. His eyes, brown and kind, immediately scanned the room and found Elisha. Rachel watched him watching her, saw the way his entire body oriented toward where Elisha stood, coordinating the cocktail service. She was wearing a professional but stunning midnight blue sheath dress, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that showed off the graceful line of her neck. She looked like a queen managing her court, and Grayson Whitmore looked like a man seeing the sun after years of darkness. "Uncle Grayson," Rachel called out, using the familiar title she'd never been given permission to use. Several heads turned, including her father's, his expression darkening at this breach of protocol. But Grayson smiled, a real smile, not the society version, and walked over to her. "Rachel, how wonderful to see you. You look lovely tonight." "Did you know Elisha planned all this?" Rachel asked innocently, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "She saved the whole party. Scarlett says she's a miracle worker." "Is that so?" Grayson's eyes found Elisha again. "I'm not surprised. Ms. Cuthbert has quite a reputation for excellence." "You know her?" Rachel pressed, playing the curious child. "We've crossed paths at various events," Grayson said carefully. "I'm a great admirer of her work." "Just her work?" Rachel asked, with the devastating honesty only children could deploy. Grayson actually colored slightly, and Rachel felt a flutter of victory. Before he could answer, Elisha appeared, having noticed their conversation. "Mr. Whitmore," she said professionally, though Rachel caught the slight catch in her voice. "How kind of you to attend. Ms. Cuthbert, the transformation is remarkable, though I understand that's your specialty, making beauty from difficult circumstances." Their eyes held for a moment too long, and Rachel could practically feel the chemistry crackling between them. But Elisha, ever professional, simply nodded and turned to Rachel. "Sweetheart, shouldn't you be with the other young guests? I believe there's a special children's area in the conservatory." "I'd rather stay with you," Rachel said truthfully. "Father never notices where I am anyway." She saw the flash of concern in Elisha's eyes, the maternal instinct flaring. "Well, perhaps you could help me with something. I need someone to ensure the dessert presentation is perfect. Think you could be my assistant?" "Really?" Rachel let excitement color her voice. "Oh yes, I'd love to help." As they walked toward the kitchen, Grayson following at a discreet distance, Rachel heard her father's voice cutting through the party noise. "Quite the performance," Hayden was saying to a group of his business associates, his voice carrying that particular tone of cruelty he'd perfected. "My ex-wife playing party planner, though I suppose it's fitting. She always was better at appearances than substance." "Funny," one of the men, Mr. Yamamoto, the Japanese investor, said coolly. "I was just thinking how substantial this event is. My wife is particularly impressed. She wants Ms. Cuthbert's contact information for our anniversary celebration." Hayden's laugh was forced. "I'm sure Scarlett could give you some recommendations for more appropriate planners." More appropriate than the woman who single-handedly saved your engagement party? Mrs. Yamamoto had joined them, her tone deceptively mild. How interesting. In Tokyo, we have a saying, "The cherry blossom that blooms after the harsh winter is the most beautiful." Your ex-wife seems to have bloomed quite magnificently. Rachel bit back a smile as she watched her father struggle for a response, but the best was yet to come. The dessert presentation was Elisha's masterpiece, a 7-tier cake that was less confection and more architecture, with sugarwork so delicate it looked like spun glass, surrounded by individual desserts that were miniature works of art. Rachel stood beside Elisha as the cake was wheeled out, and she made sure to be looking at her father when his jaw dropped. "Ladies and gentlemen," Scarlett announced, clearly reading from cards Elisha had prepared, "we want to thank you all for celebrating with us tonight. This magical evening wouldn't have been possible without the incredible talent of Elisha Cuthbert." The applause was thunderous. Rachel watched her father's face cycle through emotions, anger, humiliation, and something else. Fear. He was watching his social capital shift in real time, seeing how the crowd responded to Elisha versus how they responded to him. But the moment that would stay with Rachel forever came during the dancing. The band had started playing, and couples moved onto the floor. Hayden and Scarlett performed their rehearsed dance, all technical perfection without soul. Then other couples joined, and Rachel watched Grayson approach Elisha, who was standing near the service entrance, still working despite the party being in full swing. "Would you honor me with a dance?" he asked quietly. "I'm working, Mr. Whitmore," Elisha responded, but Rachel heard the longing in her voice. "One dance," he persisted gently. "You've created all this beauty. You should enjoy at least a moment of it." Elisha hesitated, then looked at Rachel, who gave her an encouraging nod. "One dance," she agreed. They moved onto the floor, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Where Hayden and Scarlett had been stiff and rehearsed, Elisha and Grayson moved like water, like they'd been dancing together their entire lives. He held her with careful respect, but his eyes devoured her with a hunger that was all the more powerful for being restrained. "They're beautiful together," someone whispered. "Like a fairy tale," another voice agreed. "Makes you wonder what kind of fool would let a woman like that go," a third added, loud enough for Hayden to hear. Rachel pulled out her phone, recording not just the dance but her father's face as he watched his ex-wife outshine him at his own engagement party. She saw the moment he realized what everyone else was thinking, that he'd traded a diamond for glass, that his cruelty had cost him something precious. But more importantly, she saw Scarlett watching too, saw the younger woman's face tighten with jealousy and insecurity. Seeds of doubt, Rachel thought. Water them carefully and watch them grow. The dance ended, and Grayson and Elisha separated with visible reluctance. But as Grayson walked Elisha back to her station, his hand briefly touched hers, just a brush of fingers, but Rachel saw Elisha's breath catch, saw her touch that hand with her other one as if to hold the sensation. The rest of the party proceeded flawlessly, but Rachel noticed the shift in dynamics. Guests sought out Elisha to compliment her work. Business cards were exchanged. Scarlett grew increasingly sullen as person after person praised the ex-wife's superiority. And Hayden drank, heavily. Near midnight, when the party was winding down, Rachel found Elisha on the terrace, finally taking a moment to breathe. The woman looked tired but triumphant, and Rachel felt a surge of fierce pride. "You were amazing," Rachel said softly, coming to stand beside her. "Thank you, sweetheart. You were quite the helper tonight." "Elisha?" Rachel let vulnerability creep into her voice. "Do you ever think about before, when you lived here?" Elisha's expression softened. "Sometimes. I think about you a lot, actually. I've wondered if you were okay, if you were happy." "I'm not," Rachel said simply, honestly. "Happy, I mean. He doesn't see me. Not really. And Scarlett thinks I'm an inconvenience. Sometimes I feel like a ghost in my own house." "Oh, baby girl." Elisha turned to face her fully, and Rachel saw tears threatening in her eyes. "You are not a ghost. You are a brilliant, dozens of them, all addressed to Elisha, all unmailed. The earliest was dated just after their wedding, the latest from last month." Rachel's hands trembled as she photographed each one, reading her father's words with growing nausea and rage. "My darling Elisha," one began, "I hit you again today. You'll never read this, but I need to write it. I need to confess that every time I hurt you, I feel powerful for a moment, then hollow forever after. You're everything I'm not. Warm, genuine, capable of real love. I destroy you because I can't be you, because your light makes my darkness unbearable." Another, from the week before he'd served her with divorce papers. "I'm going to leave you with nothing. It's already in motion. But know that taking everything from you won't fill this emptiness. You'll rebuild because that's who you are. You'll rise, and I'll watch from my cold tower, surrounded by people who fear me but don't love me, knowing I had love and murdered it with my own hands." The most recent one made Rachel's blood run cold. "Saw you at the gala. You were magnificent. I wanted to kneel at your feet and beg forgiveness. Instead, I humiliated you again. It's all I know how to do. Rachel looks more like you every day, acts like you. Sometimes I hate her for it. Sometimes I hate her for being the proof that you existed in my life, that I had something real and destroyed it. I'm going to destroy her too. It's what I do." Rachel photographed everything, her young mind trying to process the pathology of a man who knew he was a monster but chose to remain one. These letters weren't love. They were the self-pitying confessions of an abuser who wanted credit for feeling bad about his abuse while continuing to perpetrate it. She was so absorbed that she almost missed the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Almost. Moving with practiced efficiency, Rachel returned everything to its exact position, closed the safe, and slipped behind the heavy curtains, just as the door opened. It wasn't Hayden or Scarlett. It was Stella Christensen, Hayden's older sister. Stella was everything Hayden wasn't: kind, principled, and strong in a way that didn't require cruelty. She'd been the only family member to maintain contact with Elisha after the divorce, though she had to do it secretly. She stood in the doorway for a moment, then entered and went straight to Hayden's desk. "I know you're here, Rachel," she said quietly. "I saw you on the security feed from my phone. Don't worry, I deleted it." Rachel emerged from behind the curtain, her chin raised despite her racing heart. "Aunt Stella, what were you looking for, sweetheart?" Rachel considered lying, but something in Stella's eyes stopped her. Evidence. Evidence of what? Of what he really is, what he's done, what he's planning to do. Stella sat down heavily in Hayden's chair, looking older than her 42 years. "You know, don't you? About all of it." "I know he's a monster," Rachel said simply. "I know he hurt Elisha. I know he's stealing from his investors. I know about the offshore accounts, the bribed officials, the women he's paid to keep quiet. I know everything." "My God," Stella breathed. "You're 9 years old." "Age doesn't matter when you're fighting for survival," Rachel replied, sounding decades older than her years. "He's going to destroy me, Aunt Stella. He wrote it in a letter. He hates me because I remind him of her, because I'm proof that he's capable of creating something but not of loving it." Stella's eyes filled with tears. "Come here, sweetheart." Rachel went to her, allowing herself to be held for just a moment. Stella smelled like lavender and safety, and Rachel wished desperately that she could just be a child in her aunt's arms, but she couldn't afford that luxury. "I'm going to stop him," Rachel whispered. "I'm going to save Elisha, save myself, save everyone he's hurt." "How?" I've been collecting evidence for 3 years. Videos, recordings, documents. I have enough to destroy him, but I need to do it right. I need allies." Stella pulled back to look at her niece's face. "You have one. What do you need from me?" "Access to the family trust documents, and I need you to be ready to take custody when the time comes." "Rachel, this is dangerous. If Hayden finds out—" "He won't. I'm very careful, and I'm very patient." Rachel moved to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "There's going to be an event soon, a big one. The charity auction for the museum. Elisha will be planning it, and everyone important will be there. That's when I'm going to reveal everything. That's in 3 months. I know. I need time to gather the rest of what I need, and I need to make sure Elisha is protected. He's escalating. He hit her Saturday night." "He what?" Stella's voice was sharp. "I have it on video. He slapped her on the terrace after the party. She didn't even flinch, Aunt Stella. Beautiful child who deserves to be seen and loved and celebrated every single day." "You saw me," Rachel whispered. "You always saw me." "I still do," Elisha said firmly. "And Rachel? If you ever need anything at all, you have my number now. Use it." Rachel nodded, filling away this promise. She would definitely use it, though not in the way Elisha expected. A movement caught her eye, and she saw her father standing in the doorway, watching them. His expression was unreadable, but Rachel recognized the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. He was seeing his daughter choose his ex-wife over him, and it was eating him alive. "Rachel," he said coldly, "bed, now." "Yes, father," Rachel said obediently, but before she left, she hugged Elisha tightly, whispering, "Thank you for coming back." As she passed her father in the doorway, she heard him hiss at Elisha, "Stay away from my daughter." "She's the one who sought me out, Hayden," Elisha replied calmly. "Perhaps if you paid her any attention, she wouldn't need to seek maternal affection from someone you discarded. You know nothing about my relationship with my daughter. I know she's lost weight. I know she's lonely. I know she's desperately seeking approval you're too narcissistic to give. And I know that one day she's going to be old enough to choose who she wants in her life. You might want to think about that." Rachel paused at the top of the stairs, recording every word on her phone. Her father's response was predictably cruel. "She's my blood. She'll always choose me." "Blood doesn't make family, Hayden. Love does. And you don't know how to love anyone but yourself." The slap was sharp and sudden. Rachel gasped, nearly dropping her phone, but she kept recording as Elisha stood there, her cheek reddening, her expression not shocked but sadly unsurprised. "There he is," Elisha said quietly, "the real Hayden Christensen, the one who hits women when they speak truths he doesn't want to hear." "You'll say nothing about this," Hayden snarled. "No one would believe you anyway." "I don't need anyone to believe me," Elisha said, walking past him with her head high. "You just proved everything I needed to know. You haven't changed at all." After they were both gone, Rachel saved the video to her encrypted cloud storage, labeling it Evidence File Number 47, Assault. Her father had just made a critical error. He'd shown his true face, and Rachel had caught it all. Tomorrow, she would begin the next phase. She would reach out to Stella, her aunt, who had always disapproved of Hayden's treatment of women. She would plant more seeds with Scarlett about Hayden's temper. And she would ensure that Grayson Whitmore received an anonymous tip about a certain investment opportunity that would put him in direct competition with her father's biggest deal. But tonight she allowed herself one moment of pure feeling. She touched her own cheek, where Elisha had kissed her goodnight weeks ago, the last time she'd felt truly loved. "Soon, Mom Elisha," she whispered to the darkness. "Soon you'll be free of him forever. And so will I." Chapter 4. The Letters Never Sent. Monday morning arrived with rain beating against the windows of the Christensen mansion. and Rachel used the cover of the storm to execute her most dangerous mission yet. Her father had left for his office at dawn, still nursing his rage from Saturday night and a considerable hangover. Scarlett was at her Pilates class, then her standing appointment at the med spa, a routine that never varied and gave Rachel exactly 4 hours of guaranteed access to her father's study. The study was supposed to be impenetrable. Hayden had installed a biometric lock, security cameras, and even a silent alarm system. What he hadn't counted on was his 9-year-old daughter having spent the last 2 years studying his every move, recording his passwords with hidden cameras, and lifting his fingerprints from glasses to create a silicon duplicate that would fool the scanner. Rachel slipped inside at 9:17 a.m., her heart pounding but her hands steady. The room still smelled like him, expensive cologne failing to mask the underlying scent of whiskey and cigars. The walls were lined with his trophies, photos of him with politicians, framed magazine covers featuring his real estate empire, and notably not a single picture of his daughter. She went straight to the hidden safe behind the portrait of his father, another cruel man who'd taught Hayden that power was better than love. The combination was his wedding anniversary with Elisha, a detail that made Rachel's stomach turn. Even in his cruelty, he couldn't let her go completely. Inside the safe were the predictable items: cash, bonds, property deeds, and a .38 revolver that Rachel photographed but didn't touch. But there, in a leather portfolio at the very back, were the letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Elisha. She's so used to it that she didn't even flinch. Stella stood up, pacing to the window. Our father was the same way. Did you know that? He hit our mother, hit us. Hayden learned that power meant violence, that love was weakness. I tried to protect him from it, but instead, he became it. You're nothing like him, Rachel said firmly. Neither am I. We choose who we become, don't we? Yes, sweetheart, we do. They stood together in silence for a moment. Then Stella asked, What about Grayson Whitmore? I saw how he looked at Elisha at the party. Rachel smiled for the first time that morning. He's been in love with her for over a year. He's a good man. I've researched him thoroughly. No scandals, no cruelty. Just a man who built his fortune through innovation and treats people with respect. He could make her happy. But she won't let herself be loved while Hayden still has power over her. She's too proud, too wounded. That's why I have to destroy him completely. Only when he's powerless can she be free to choose happiness. Stella touched Rachel's face gently. You're mine. You know that? The moment this is over, you're mine. I've already got the lawyers preparing the papers. I know, Rachel said softly. I'm counting on it. A car door slammed outside and both of them froze. Scarlett was home early. Go, Stella said urgently. I'll handle her. Rachel slipped out through the service corridor, her heart pounding as she heard Scarlett's shrill voice demanding to know why Stella was there. She made it to her room just as Scarlett started up the stairs and quickly opened her schoolbooks, assuming the position of a dutiful child doing homework. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but Rachel recognized the handwriting in the attached photo immediately. It was another letter, this one in Elisha's hand. Grayson, I can't accept your dinner invitation. You're a good man, and I'm still too broken. Hayden took things from me I'm still trying to find. I won't subject you to my damage. Please understand. E. Below it, Grayson had written, I'll wait. As long as it takes. You're not broken, you're healing. There's a difference. G. Rachel realized Grayson had sent this to her deliberately, trusting a 9-year-old with his vulnerability. She texted back from her encrypted phone, keep writing to her. She needs to know someone sees her as whole, not broken. The monster will fall soon. Be ready to catch her when he does. His response was immediate. Who is this? Someone who loves her too. Someone who's going to set her free. Trust me. The daughter. Rachel didn't respond, but she knew he'd figured it out. Smart man. He'd be good for Elisha. That evening at dinner, Hayden was in rare form, 3 drinks in before the first course, and radiating menace like a nuclear reactor approaching meltdown. Stella was here today, he said, his eyes fixed on Rachel. In my study. I was showing her the new security system, Scarlett said quickly. She wanted to see how it worked. Did she? Hayden's voice was silky with threat. And you, Rachel? What were you doing today? Homework? Rachel said calmly, meeting his gaze steadily. Mathematics and French. Would you like to see? Don't be smart with me, little girl. I'm not being smart, Father. I'm being honest, though I understand you might not recognize the difference. The silence was deafening. Scarlett's fork clattered against her plate. Hayden stood slowly, his face darkening. Go to your room. May I take my dinner? Go! Rachel stood with dignity, exactly as she'd seen Elisha do 1,000 times. Good evening, Father. Scarlett. As she walked up the stairs, she heard Scarlett whisper, She's just like her. I know, Hayden replied, and the hatred in his voice was pure poison. That's the problem. In her room, Rachel pulled out the letters she'd photographed and began composing an email to 3 journalists she'd been cultivating relationships with under various false identities. She didn't send it. Not yet. But when the time came, the world would read Hayden Christensen's confessions in his own handwriting. She looked at the photo of Elisha she kept hidden in her desk drawer, the only motherly smile she'd known, and whispered, Almost there, Mom Elisha. Almost free. Chapter 5. When Kings Fall. The Metropolitan Business Alliance's annual gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar, and this year, Elisha Cuthbert wasn't just planning it. She was being honored as Entrepreneur of the Year. Rachel had orchestrated this too, though no one would ever know, through careful manipulation of online voting, strategic emails from concerned citizens praising Elisha's work, and a particularly glowing recommendation she'd ghostwritten from the mayor's wife, sent from a spoofed email address. She'd ensured Elisha would be standing on that stage, triumphant, while her father watched from below. The November evening was crystalline, cold enough to require furs and wraps, the kind of weather that made the city shimmer like a jewel box. Rachel had convinced Stella to bring her as her +1, claiming she needed to attend for a school project on successful women in business. Hayden couldn't refuse his sister without looking petty, though his jaw had clenched when he heard Rachel would be there. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton had been transformed into Elisha's vision of modern Versailles, mirrors and gold, but softened with thousands of white roses and hanging crystals that caught the light like frozen fireworks. It was opulent but tasteful, commanding but not desperate, everything Hayden tried to be but wasn't. Rachel positioned herself strategically near the sound system, her phone ready to record everything. She'd also placed tiny cameras at 3 different angles earlier that day, during the school tour she'd arranged with the hotel manager. Tonight would yield evidence she couldn't even predict yet. Hayden arrived with Scarlett, who wore a red gown so tight, Rachel wondered how she could breathe. They made their entrance like royalty, but Rachel noticed immediately that something was off. Several of Hayden's usual associates barely acknowledged him. The mayor, who normally would have rushed over, simply nodded from across the room. What's happening? Rachel asked Stella innocently. Stella lowered her voice. The Yamamoto deal fell through. Your father was supposed to secure the waterfront development project with their investment, but somehow another buyer swooped in at the last minute with a better offer. Rachel hid her smile. The other buyer was a shell company she'd created using some of Hayden's own hidden assets, the ownership traced through such a complex web that it would take forensic accountants months to unravel. She'd essentially made him bid against himself and lose. Grayson Whitmore entered alone as always, But his eyes immediately found Elisha, who was directing the final touches near the stage. Tonight, she wore an emerald green gown that made her skin glow like burnished bronze, her hair in a complex updo that showcased the elegant line of her neck. She looked like African royalty, and Grayson stared like a man witnessing divinity. "Mr. Whitmore," Rachel said, approaching him with calculated innocence, "you look lost." He smiled down at her, and Rachel saw why Elisha might eventually love him. His kindness was genuine, reaching his eyes. "Miss Rachel, I'm not lost, just appreciating the artwork." "She is beautiful, isn't she?" Rachel said, deliberately misunderstanding. "The room, I mean." Elisha outdid herself. "Yes," he agreed softly. "She certainly did. You should tell her. She doesn't hear it enough, that she's appreciated." Grayson studied the child's face. "You're very protective of her." "Someone has to be. She protects everyone else but forgets herself." "And your father?" Rachel's expression hardened just enough for him to see the steel beneath the child. "My father destroys beautiful things. It's his nature, but nature can be overcome by choice, don't you think?" Before Grayson could respond, the lights dimmed and the evening's program began. Rachel watched her father's face as the president of the Business Alliance took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our dinner service, I want to address some unfortunate news. As many of you have heard, there have been serious allegations of financial irregularities concerning one of our members. The Alliance takes such matters seriously, and pending investigation, we've had to revoke certain memberships and privileges." Hayden's face went white, then red. Scarlett grabbed his arm as whispers rippled through the crowd. Rachel kept her expression neutral, but inside she was electric with victory. The anonymous tip about his embezzlement, complete with documented evidence, had reached the right people at exactly the right time. "However," the president continued, "tonight is about celebrating excellence, integrity, and innovation. No one embodies these qualities more than our Entrepreneur of the Year, Elisha Cuthbert." The applause was thunderous. Elisha looked genuinely shocked as she made her way to the stage, and Rachel felt a surge of pure love for this woman who'd shown her what strength looked like. "Thank you," Elisha began, her voice clear and strong. "This honor means more than you know. 3 years ago, I lost everything. My marriage, my home, my sense of self. I was told I would never amount to anything without my husband's name and connections." Her eyes found Hayden in the crowd, and Rachel saw her father shrink slightly. "But I learned something vital. When you've lost everything, you're free to become anything. I rebuilt not just my business, but myself. Every event I plan, every celebration I coordinate is a testament to resurrection, to the phoenix rising not in spite of the ashes, but because of them." More applause. But Elisha wasn't finished. "I want to dedicate this award to every woman who's been told she's not enough, to every person who's had to rebuild from ruins, and especially to a young girl who reminds me daily that strength isn't about never falling, it's about how you rise." Her eyes found Rachel, and Rachel felt tears threatening for the first time in years. She touched her hand to her heart, and Elisha mirrored the gesture. That's when Hayden exploded. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, standing abruptly. "This woman is a fraud. She built her business on my contacts, my reputation. She's nothing but a—" "Mr. Christensen," the president's voice was arctic. "You're no longer a member of this organization. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "What? This is insane. I've been a member for 15 years. "And in those 15 years, you've allegedly embezzled over $3 million from joint ventures. The FBI will want to speak with you on Monday. I suggest you enjoy your weekend." The security guards were already moving. Scarlett was backing away from Hayden like he was radioactive, and everyone was watching his spectacular fall. "This is her doing," Hayden pointed at Elisha. "She's poisoning you all against me." "No, Hayden," a new voice said. Rachel turned to see Mr. Yamamoto standing. "Your destruction is entirely self-made. Ms. Cuthbert has been nothing but professional. You, however, tried to bribe my associates, forge my signature, and steal from my company. We have it all documented." More gasps. Rachel made sure her cameras were catching every angle. "As do I," another voice added. "Mrs. Pemberton, the mayor's wife. You attempted to blackmail my husband with fabricated photos. We have the forensic analysis proving they're fake." "And I," Grayson said, standing slowly, his presence commanding attention. "You tried to sabotage my acquisition of the waterfront property by spreading lies about environmental concerns. Fortunately, the EPA cleared everything yesterday. It was an avalanche, each revelation building on the last." Rachel watched her father's world crumble in real time, saw the exact moment he realized he'd been outmaneuvered not by one person but by everyone he'd wronged. "Rachel," he said suddenly, his eyes finding his daughter, tell them this is all lies." Rachel stood slowly, and the room seemed to hold its breath. This 9-year-old child commanded attention like someone triple her age. "I can't lie for you, Father," she said clearly. "I have recordings of you admitting to everything they're saying. I have documents you thought you'd destroyed. I have videos of you hurting people, including Elisha. You little—" He started toward her, but Grayson and 3 other men stepped between them. "I'd think very carefully about your next move, Christensen," Grayson said quietly, dangerously. "She's my daughter." "No," Rachel said, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "I'm Elisha's daughter in every way that matters. You're just the man whose DNA I carry, a biological accident I'll spend my life overcoming." The words hit him like physical blows. He stood there, swaying slightly, his empire in ruins, his daughter rejecting him publicly, his ex-wife standing triumphant on the stage above him. "Security," the president said firmly. "Please escort Mr. Christensen out." As the guards approached, Hayden made one last desperate play. "Scarlett, tell them we're leaving." Scarlett looked at him, then at the room full of powerful people who'd just rejected him, then at her own future disappearing. "I don't know you," she said coldly, removing her engagement ring and dropping it on the floor. "I never did." She walked away, her heels clicking like a countdown to his complete isolation. Hayden was escorted out in full view of everyone, but not before he turned back one more time. His eyes found Rachel, and what she saw there should have frightened her. Pure, undiluted hatred. "This isn't over," he mouthed. Rachel smiled, an expression far too knowing for a child. "Yes, it is," she mouthed back. After he was gone, the room erupted in confused conversation. Elisha had come down from the stage and was moving toward Rachel, but Grayson reached the child first. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "I'm free," Rachel said simply. "We both are." Elisha reached them then, and without hesitation pulled Rachel into her arms. "Baby girl, what you did—" "What I did was overdue," Rachel said, her voice muffled against Elisha's dress. "He hurt you. He hurt so many people. Someone had to stop him." "But you're 9 years old. Age doesn't matter when you're fighting monsters." Rachel pulled back to look at Elisha's face. "You taught me that. Every time you stood tall when he tried to break you, you taught me that." Chapter 6. The Garden of Truth. The Memorial Garden dedication was scheduled for the last Sunday in November, when the autumn leaves created a tapestry of gold and crimson against the grey Connecticut sky, and Elisha had poured her heart into every detail. Rachel had known about this event for months. It was Elisha's most personal project, a garden dedicated to her late mother, Naomi Cuthbert, on the grounds of the hospice where she'd spent her final days. What Rachel hadn't expected was for her father to know about it too, or for him to plan his cruelest attack yet. Since his public humiliation 3 weeks ago, Hayden had been spiraling. The FBI had frozen his assets pending investigation. His business partners had abandoned him. Even his country club had quietly suggested he might be happier elsewhere. But a wounded predator was the most dangerous kind, and Rachel knew he would strike back. She'd intercepted his emails, his password remained pathetically predictable, and discovered his plan: destroy the memorial service, humiliate Alicia at her most vulnerable moment, and use it to fuel a narrative that she was unstable and vindictive, ammunition for the custody battle he was planning to wage over Rachel. But Rachel had plans of her own. The morning of the dedication dawned crisp and bright. Rachel had stayed with Stella the night before, claiming she felt unsafe at home with her father's increasingly erratic behavior. It wasn't a lie. Hayden had taken to drinking heavily and raging at Shadows, and Scarlett had moved out entirely, taking her jewelry and leaving her engagement ring in the toilet. Rachel dressed carefully in the navy dress Elisha had given her years ago, now a bit short but still precious. She pinned a white rose to her collar, Naomi's favorite flower, according to the research she'd done. "You sure you want to go?" Stella asked, concern evident in her voice. "If Hayden shows up?" "He will," Rachel said calmly, "but I'll be ready." They arrived at the hospice grounds early. Elisha had transformed the space into something magical, a circular garden with winding paths, each section representing a different aspect of her mother's life. The nurse's corner with healing herbs, the teacher's grove with benches for reading, the mother's heart at the center with a fountain that sang softly in the morning air. Alicia was there already, arranging the final touches. She wore a simple black dress with an African kente cloth stole, honoring both her mourning and her heritage. When she saw Rachel, her face softened. "You came," she said softly. "You needed me here," Rachel replied simply, "and I have something for you." She pulled out a small leather journal, worn with age. "I found this in Father's safe. It's your mother's. He must have taken it when he threw out your things." Elisha's hands trembled as she took the journal. "My God, I thought it was lost forever. This has her last words, her letters to me." Tears streamed down her face. "Rachel, how did you—" "It doesn't matter how. What matters is, it's back where it belongs." Grayson arrived then, and Rachel noticed he'd brought an entire team of discreet security. Smart man. He'd sensed trouble too. "Miss Cuthbert," he said gently, "the space is beautiful. Your mother would be proud." "Thank you for coming," Elisha said, wiping her tears. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said simply. "You shouldn't face this alone." More people began arriving, nurses who'd cared for Naomi, families whose loved ones had been comforted by her kindness, community members who remembered her service. And then, like a storm cloud crossing the sun, Hayden appeared. He looked terrible, unshaven, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. But he'd brought reinforcements, a photographer, someone who looked like a reporter, and his lawyer. "How touching," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "My ex-wife, playing the grieving daughter. Tell me, Elisha, did you mention to these people how you abandoned your mother to chase after my money?" "That's a lie," Elisha said quietly but firmly. "Is it? I have records showing you missed her treatments to attend my business dinners. You chose diamonds over your dying mother." Rachel felt rage building in her chest. But then she heard another voice, unexpected and powerful. "That's enough, Hayden." It was Dr. Patricia Morgan, the hospice director, a small woman with an iron spine. "I was Naomi's primary physician," she continued. "Elisha never missed a single treatment. In fact, she often slept in the chair beside her mother's bed, still in her evening gown from whatever event you had demanded she attend. She would rush here between your social obligations, holding her mother's hand through chemotherapy while you texted her about being late to return. That's not—" "I have the visitor logs," Dr. Morgan said coldly. "Every single visit. Would you like me to read them aloud? October 15th, 2:47 a.m. Elisha arrives still in formal wear. October 16th, she doesn't leave for 36 hours straight. October 17th, stop! Hayden snarled. But others were speaking now. A nurse. She paid for experimental treatments out of her own savings, money she'd hidden because you monitored all her spending. A patient's daughter. She held my mother's hand too when her own mother was sleeping. She comforted strangers while you texted her threats about divorce if she didn't come home. The reporter Hayden had brought was scribbling frantically, but not the story Hayden had planned. "This is an ambush," Hayden's lawyer said. "We're leaving." "No," Rachel said, stepping forward. "You came here to destroy something beautiful, Father. At least have the courage to stay for the whole show." She pulled out her phone and connected it to the portable speaker she'd hidden earlier. Suddenly, Hayden's voice filled the garden. "Your mother's dying? Good. Maybe when she's dead, you'll stop using her as an excuse to avoid your real duties. You're my wife, not her nurse. Let the professionals handle it." Then Elisha's voice, broken with tears. "She's my mother, Hayden. She's dying. We all die, Elisha. The question is whether we matter while we're alive. And right now you're making me look bad by constantly leaving events. Choose me or her." The recording ended. The silence was deafening. That's edited," Hayden stammered. "That's taken out of context." "Here's the full conversation," Rachel said calmly, preparing to play more. "Enough," Grayson said, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Christensen, you've done enough damage. Leave, now." "You can't tell me—" "Actually, I can. I now own this hospice. I purchased it yesterday. You're trespassing." Hayden's face cycled through emotions: rage, humiliation, desperation. "Rachel, you're coming with me." "No, Father, I'm not. You're my daughter." "Biologically, yes, but family is more than blood. It's love, sacrifice, presence. Elisha taught me that. She was more of a parent to me in 3 years than you've been in 9. I'll drag you to court, where you'll have to explain the bruises on my arms from when you grabbed me last week, the recording of you saying you wish I'd never been born, the evidence of you planning to send me to Switzerland to get rid of the problem." Each word was a nail in his coffin. The reporter was recording everything. The photographer was capturing his unraveling. "You poisonous little—" He moved toward her, but suddenly found himself face to face with not just Grayson, but a wall of people, nurses, visitors, strangers who'd formed a protective barrier around the child. "Touch her," Grayson said very quietly, "and I will end you. Not financially. You've already done that yourself. But I will ensure you never walk without looking over your shoulder again." Something in his tone must have penetrated Hayden's rage because he stepped back. "This isn't over," he said to Elisha. "I'll destroy you." "No, Hayden," Elisha said, and her voice was almost pitying. "You'll try. You'll fail. And eventually you'll realize that your destruction was always internal. You carry your own hell with you." She turned away from him, dismissing him as utterly as one might dismiss a shadow when stepping into the light. "The dedication will begin now," she announced to the gathered crowd. "Those who wish to celebrate Naomi Cuthbert's life and legacy are welcome to stay." Hayden stood there for another moment, a king without a kingdom, a father without a family, a man without a soul worth saving. Then he turned and walked away, his lawyer and hired witnesses trailing after him like reluctant shadows. The dedication proceeded beautifully after that. Elisha spoke about her mother with love and grace, reading from the recovered journal. Others shared memories. Even Rachel spoke, talking about how Naomi's granddaughter of the heart was carrying on her legacy of strength. As the sun set, painting the garden in shades of gold and rose, Grayson approached Elisha where she stood by the fountain. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "She would be proud." "She would have liked you," Elisha said unexpectedly. She always said I should find someone who saw my strength as beauty, not a threat. And do you think—" He hesitated. "Do you think you might let someone see that strength up close?" Elisha looked at him for a long moment. "I'm still healing, Grayson. Still finding pieces of myself I thought were lost forever." "I know," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to be healed. I'm asking if you might let someone walk beside you while you heal." Their hands were resting on the fountain's edge, and slowly, so slowly it might have been accidental, their fingers touched. Just barely, just enough for Rachel to see from where she watched. "Maybe," Elisha whispered. "Maybe." Chapter 7. Beneath the Mask. The engagement party that Hayden had insisted on throwing despite losing Scarlett was perhaps the most spectacular example of delusional grandeur the Connecticut social scene had ever witnessed. It was 2 weeks before Christmas, and Hayden had somehow convinced a young socialite named Penelope Ashford, 23, desperate for status and heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, to accept his proposal after knowing him for exactly 18 days. The speed was desperate, the motive transparent. Hayden needed to appear stable for his upcoming court battles and frozen asset hearings. Rachel had been ordered to attend, dressed in a ridiculous pink confection that made her look like a demented birthday cake. She'd complied, knowing this would be the perfect stage for the next phase of her plan. The party was at the Fairmont Hotel's ballroom. Hayden couldn't use his mansion, which was being assessed by federal investigators. He'd hired the most expensive everything, trying to project wealth he no longer possessed. The effect was gaudy rather than elegant, desperate rather than confident. But the masterstroke of delusion. He'd hired Elisha's company to plan it. Of course, he hadn't hired her directly. He'd gone through Penelope, who'd gone through her mother, who'd insisted on the best, without realizing the irony. Elisha had accepted, and Rachel knew exactly why. This was Elisha's chance to show everyone definitively who had truly won. The ballroom was exquisite in its restraint. Where Hayden had demanded opulence, Elisha had delivered elegance. Where he'd wanted to scream wealth, she'd whispered class. It was so perfectly not what he'd wanted while being exactly what he'd asked for that Rachel had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. "Champagne, miss?" a server asked. "Sparkling cider, please," Rachel replied, recognizing him as one of Grayson's security team in disguise. The man winked and handed her a glass, whispering, "Your aunt is by the terrace. Mr. Whitmore has the exits covered." Rachel nodded, grateful for the protection. She'd shared her plans with Stella and Grayson, knowing tonight would be explosive. The guests were arriving, a B-list crowd, as the A-listers had all declined. The mayor had sent his deputy. The business elite had sent their assistants. It was a room full of people who were there for the spectacle, not the celebration. Hayden stood near the entrance, Penelope on his arm. She was pretty in a fragile way, like spun glass that would shatter at the first real pressure. Her eyes darted nervously, and Rachel noticed her flinch when Hayden's grip on her arm tightened. Another victim in the making. Rachel positioned herself near the stage, her phone ready. She'd prepared a presentation, weeks of work compressed into 10 minutes of devastating truth. The AV system was already queued up, thanks to a sympathetic technician who'd lost his retirement savings to one of Hayden's schemes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayden's voice boomed over the microphone, "welcome to our celebration of new beginnings." "More like desperate endings," someone muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Hayden's jaw tightened, but he continued. "I want to thank you all for joining us, and especially my beautiful bride-to-be Penelope, who has brought light back into my life after a period of difficulty." Rachel almost snorted. Difficulty. That's what he called federal investigation and social exile. "I also want to address the elephant in the room," Hayden continued, and Rachel tensed. "My ex-wife's company planned this event. I want everyone to know this was Penelope's choice, and I support it. I harbor no ill will toward Elisha. In fact, I wish her well in her endeavors. The condescension in his tone was thick enough to choke on. That's when Elisha entered. She wasn't supposed to be there. The event planner typically didn't attend as a guest. But she walked in like she owned the space, wearing a black gown that made her look like vengeance personified. Beside her, Grayson Whitmore cut an equally impressive figure. The room fell silent. "Hayden," Elisha said pleasantly, "congratulations on your engagement. 4th time's the charm, they say." "It's my 3rd engagement," Hayden said through gritted teeth. "Oh, are we not counting Margaret? The one you were engaged to while married to me? My mistake." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Penelope's face went white. "That's a lie. I have the receipts," Elisha said calmly. "Literally. Tiffany's, March 2019, 2-carat diamond, charged to the joint account. I always wondered why we were hemorrhaging money." "This is neither the time nor—" "You're right," Elisha agreed. "Your daughter has something she'd like to say." All eyes turned to Rachel. She walked to the microphone with measured steps, her small stature somehow commanding in its dignity. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Rachel Christensen, and I'm 9 years old. My father thinks I'm a prop, something to parade when convenient and ignore when not. But I've been watching, I've been listening, and I've been recording." The screens around the room flickered to life. The first video showed Hayden in his study, drunk, raging at Scarlett. The brat's not even mine, probably. Elisha was always whoring around, but the DNA test was inconclusive, so I'm stuck with her. Rachel's voice continued over the video. The DNA test wasn't inconclusive. He never took one. He just didn't want to know for sure because then he'd lose leverage. The next clip. Hayden on the phone with his lawyer. "I don't care if the kid ends up in foster care. Once I marry Penelope and get access to her trust fund, I'm shipping Rachel off to boarding school in Switzerland. Or maybe military school, somewhere she can't embarrass me." Penelope's hand flew to her mouth. More clips followed in rapid succession. Hayden admitting to bribing city officials, Hayden laughing about hiding money in offshore accounts, Hayden describing his plan to seduce Penelope for her money, Hayden calling his own daughter that thing and the mistake. But the final clip was the worst. It was from last week, Hayden speaking to someone on the phone. "Once I get Penelope's money, I'll destroy Elisha completely. I'll buy every venue in the city and blacklist her. I'll spread rumors about her being unstable. I'll make sure she never works again. And then, when she's at her lowest, I'll offer to take her back. She'll be so broken, she'll actually say yes. And then I'll have the pleasure of destroying her all over again, but slowly this time, very slowly." The ballroom was dead silent. Rachel looked directly at her father. "You taught me that power is everything, but you were wrong. Truth is everything, and the truth is, you're not a king or a businessman or even a father. You're just a small, cruel man who mistakes fear for respect and control for love." "You little bitch!" Hayden started toward her, but found his path blocked by not just Grayson, but 6 other men. "I'd stop right there," a new voice said. FBI agent Morrison walked in, badge visible. "Hayden Christensen, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, bribery, and tax evasion. You can't— This is my engagement party." "Was," Penelope said, yanking off her ring and throwing it at him. "You sick bastard. You were using me." "Everyone uses everyone, sweetheart," Hayden snarled. "Grow up." As the agents cuffed him, Hayden's eyes found Rachel one last time. "You've destroyed your own father. You'll regret this." "No," Rachel said calmly. "I've freed myself from a monster. The only thing I regret is that it took me 9 years to be brave enough." "She's mine!" Hayden shouted as they dragged him toward the door. "She's my blood, my property." "Actually," Stella stepped forward with a document, "she's not. This is an emergency custody order. Given your arrest and the evidence of abuse and neglect, custody has been transferred to me, effective immediately." The last thing Rachel saw of her father was his face, twisted with rage and disbelief, as the FBI led him away in handcuffs while 300 of Connecticut's elite watched. The room erupted in chaos, but Rachel felt only calm. She walked to Elisha, who pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Are you okay, baby girl?" "I'm free," Rachel whispered. "We're both free." Grayson stood protective nearby, and Rachel saw him touch Elisha's shoulder gently, a gesture of support, not possession. "Thank you," Elisha said to him softly, "for being here, for everything." "Always," he replied simply. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm. The federal courthouse in Hartford was a monument to justice, all marble columns and Lady Liberty statues, but to Rachel it felt like a gladiator arena where the final battle would be fought. It was January now, 2 weeks into the new year, and Hayden's criminal trial was set to begin in 3 days. But first came the custody hearing, Hayden's desperate attempt to regain control of Rachel, claiming his arrest was a misunderstanding and that his sister had kidnapped his daughter. Rachel sat in the family court waiting room between Stella and Elisha, her hands steady despite the storm raging in her chest. She'd dressed carefully, a simple navy dress that made her look young and vulnerable, the opposite of the warrior she truly was. This was strategy. Judges sympathized with children, not 9-year-old masterminds. "You don't have to testify," Stella said gently. "The videos are enough." "No," Rachel said firmly. "He needs to hear it from me. The court needs to hear it from me, and I need to say it." Elisha squeezed her hand. "We're right here with you, no matter what." Grayson entered the waiting room, having just come from a meeting with the prosecution. His expression was grim. Hayden's hired Richardson. Stella cursed under her breath. Marcus Richardson was the most ruthless family lawyer in the state, known for destroying children on the stand to win custody battles. "Let him come," Rachel said quietly. "I have something he doesn't expect." Before anyone could ask what she meant, the bailiff called them in. The courtroom was smaller than Rachel had imagined, more intimate, which somehow made it worse. Hayden sat at the defendant's table looking haggard but defiant. He'd lost weight in custody, his designer suit hanging loose, but his eyes still burned with that familiar cruel fire. Judge Patricia Worthington presided, a stroke of luck, as she was known for prioritizing children's welfare over parental rights. She'd also been at the gala where Hayden had first humiliated Elisha, though she would never admit that influenced her. "This is a custody hearing for Rachel Marie Christensen, age 9, the judge began. "Mr. Christensen is petitioning for immediate return of custody from his sister, Stella Christensen, who currently has temporary emergency custody." Richardson stood, his voice oily with false concern. "Your Honor, my client has been the victim of an orchestrated campaign by his vindictive ex-wife and his manipulated daughter. He's a loving father whose child has been turned against him through lies and bribes." "Interesting theory," Judge Worthington said dryly. "I've reviewed the evidence submitted, nearly 100 hours of video and audio recordings. Are you suggesting a 9-year-old fabricated all of this?" "We believe the child was coached, Your Honor. Possibly drugged or hypnotized. My client wants his daughter psychologically evaluated." "I volunteer," Rachel said suddenly, standing. "Test me for anything. Drugs, hypnosis, coaching, but I want to testify first." The judge studied her. "Are you sure, young lady? You can have a child advocate present." "I don't need one. I've been my own advocate for years." She was sworn in and took the stand. Richardson approached like a shark smelling blood. "Rachel," he began with false kindness, "you love your father, don't you?" "I loved who I thought he was," Rachel replied calmly. "I loved the idea of having a father. But the actual man? No, I don't love him. How can you love someone who sees you as property?" These are very adult words for a 9-year-old. Trauma ages you quickly, Mr. Richardson. Would you like me to use smaller words? Daddy mean. Daddy hurt people. Daddy bad. Is that better? Snickers from the gallery. The judge hid a smile. Richardson's face tightened. You've been spending a lot of time with your father's ex-wife. Has she been telling you stories about him? Number. She actually refuses to talk about him around me. She says it's not appropriate to burden children with adult problems. Unlike my father, who told me regularly that I was a burden, a mistake, and, what was the phrase? Oh yes, the consequence of a night he can't remember, with a woman he wishes he could forget. Gasps from the gallery. Hayden's face went red. That's taken out of context. Your Honor, Rachel said, turning to the judge, I have the full recording if you'd like to hear the context. It was my 7th birthday party. He was explaining to his business partner why there were no other children invited. He said bringing children around me might make their parents think he actually cared about the brat. Play it, the judge ordered. The recording filled the courtroom. It was worse in context, Hayden laughing about how he'd only kept Rachel to maintain his image as a family man for business deals. Moving on, Richardson said, clearly rattled. You claim your father neglected you, yet you lived in a mansion, attended private school, had nannies. Neglect isn't just physical, Mr. Richardson. It's forgetting your child exists for weeks at a time. It's missing every birthday, every school play, every moment that matters. It's looking through your daughter like she's invisible unless there's a camera present. She pulled out a small notebook. Would you like me to read the list? Every event he missed? I kept track. 3 years of records. He attended exactly 4 events, all of them photographed for society pages. Children exaggerate. January 15th, 2022, School Science Fair. I won first place. Father was in the building. His office is next door. He couldn't walk 50 feet. March 3rd, 2022, birthday. He was home but locked in his study. Sent the nanny with a credit card to buy a present. May 19th, 2022, school play. I played the lead. He said he'd come. I saved him a seat. It stayed empty. June, we get the point, Richardson interrupted. Do you? Rachel asked. Because there are 47 more entries for that year alone. She turned to look at Hayden directly. The saddest part isn't that you didn't love me. It's that you didn't even try to pretend except when it benefited you. Your Honor, Richardson said desperately, the child is clearly disturbed. She needs therapy, not to be kept from her father. I've been in therapy for 2 years, Rachel said calmly. Stella arranged it when she noticed I was showing signs of emotional abuse. Dr. Patricia Chen can testify if needed. She's documented everything. The judge nodded. I'd like to hear from Dr. Chen. The therapist was called. She was a small woman with a quiet authority that filled the room. Rachel is one of the most resilient children I've ever worked with, she testified. She's also one of the most traumatized. In my professional opinion, returning her to Mr. Christensen would cause irreparable psychological harm. She exhibits classic symptoms of a child who's had to raise herself while managing a narcissistic parent's ego. That's ridiculous, Hayden started to shout. Mr. Christensen, the judge warned, you'll have your chance to speak. When Hayden finally took the stand, Richardson tried to paint him as a misunderstood father, overwhelmed by business pressures, trying his best. Do you love your daughter? Richardson asked. Of course I do. She's my blood. That's not what I asked. Do you love Rachel, the person, her personality, her intelligence, her spirit? Hayden hesitated just a beat too long. She's my daughter. I want what's best for her. Which is why you told Penelope Ashford you were planning to send her to military school. That was taken out of context. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, we have Miss Ashford here to testify if needed. Penelope was called. She looked nervous, but determined. He said Rachel was damaged goods. She testified. Said her mother had ruined her with soft ideas and he needed to break her down and rebuild her properly. He showed me brochures for military academies in Eastern Europe, said they knew how to fix problem children. Did he ever speak lovingly of his daughter? The judge asked. Penelope shook her head. He spoke about her like a defective product he was stuck with. It made me sick. It's one of the reasons I ended the engagement, seeing how he talked about his own child. The final blow came when Stella testified. She spoke about finding Rachel hiding in closets to avoid her father's rages, about the child's failure to thrive despite material wealth, about the bruises she'd documented. But the worst part, Stella said, tears in her eyes, was watching my niece disappear. She stopped laughing. She stopped playing. She became this tiny adult, always watching, always afraid. In the 2 months she's been with me, I've seen glimpses of the child she could have been. Happy, free, safe. Your Honor, Richardson made one last attempt. Surely a child belongs with her biological parent. Biology doesn't make a parent, the judge interrupted. Love, care, and protection make a parent. Mr. Christensen, in all the testimony I've heard, in all the evidence presented, I haven't heard a single instance of you acting in your daughter's best interest unless it served your own. She looked at Rachel. Young lady, you're remarkably brave and remarkably brilliant. No child should have to be either to survive their childhood. Then, to the courtroom, I hereby grant permanent full custody to Stella Christensen. Hayden Christensen's parental rights are terminated effective immediately. He is to have no contact with the child until she reaches 18, and only then if she chooses to initiate contact. You can't do this, Hayden exploded, jumping to his feet. She's mine, my property, my blood. And that, Mr. Christensen, the judge said coldly, is exactly why you're losing her. Children are not property. Bailiff, please remove Mr. Christensen. As they dragged him out, he screamed at Rachel, You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back. You're nothing without my name. Rachel stood, her small frame somehow filling the courtroom. I was nothing with it. Now I get to become everything despite it. The courtroom erupted in applause, unprecedented for a custody hearing. The judge didn't even call for order. Outside the courthouse, Rachel stood between Stella and Elisha, breathing free air for the first time in her life. How do you feel? A reporter asked. Like I finally get to be a child, Rachel answered. Grayson stood nearby, and Rachel saw him take Elisha's hand quietly, away from the cameras. Elisha didn't pull away. What's next for you? Another reporter called out. Rachel looked up at the two women who'd saved her, one by blood, one by choice, and smiled. Whatever I want. For the first time in my life, whatever I want. Chapter 9. The final confrontation begins. The criminal trial of Hayden Christensen began on a morning when ice covered Hartford like a crystal shroud, making the whole city shimmer with dangerous beauty, a perfect metaphor for the man himself. Rachel sat in the prosecution's witness room, reviewing her testimony one final time. She wasn't allowed in the courtroom until called, but she could feel the electricity in the air. Today, her father would finally face the consequences of his crimes, not just against her, but against everyone he'd destroyed over the years. Stella sat beside her, holding her hand. You don't have to do this. The financial evidence is enough to convict him. The jury needs to see who he really is, Rachel said firmly. Not just a white-collar criminal, but a man who would destroy his own child for power. Elisha entered with Grayson, both dressed professionally, but with an air of unity that made Rachel's heart warm. Over the past month, their relationship had slowly evolved from careful friendship to something deeper. They thought they were being discreet, but Rachel had seen the way they looked at each other, the way their hands found each other in moments of stress. The prosecution says Hayden's lawyer is going to claim temporary insanity, Grayson reported. Says the stress of the divorce and business failures caused a breakdown. Rachel laughed bitterly. He's not insane. He's exactly who he's always been. The mask just finally came off. A knock at the door interrupted them. Assistant District Attorney James Morrison entered, his expression grim. "We have a problem," he said. "Hayden's lawyer just submitted new evidence. He claims to have proof that Rachel was coached by Elisha, that this whole thing is an elaborate revenge plot." "What kind of proof?" Stella demanded. "Emails between Elisha and Rachel, planning the downfall, discussing strategy." Rachel felt her blood turn to ice, then fire. "Those are fake. I never emailed Elisha about any of this." "We know," Morrison said, "but they're sophisticated forgeries. We need to prove they're fake, and that takes time we don't have. The judge is allowing them to be presented." "Then we pivot," Rachel said, her mind racing. "Let them present the emails. I have something better." "Rachel, what—" "Trust me," she said, looking at each adult in turn. "I've been preparing for this moment for 3 years. I'm ready." 2 hours later, the courtroom was packed. Media, society figures, victims of Hayden's schemes. Everyone wanted to witness the fall of the king. Hayden sat at the defense table in an expensive suit that couldn't hide his hollow eyes and trembling hands. Prison hadn't been kind to him. His lawyer, Richardson, again stood to make his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client is guilty. Guilty of being a flawed father, an imperfect husband, perhaps even an aggressive businessman. But he is not guilty of the crimes charged. He is the victim of an elaborate frame-up orchestrated by his ex-wife and, tragically, his own daughter, who was manipulated into destroying her father." He presented the forged emails with theatrical flair, showing supposed conversations between Elisha and Rachel, planning everything from the planted evidence to the recorded conversations. "This poor child," Richardson continued, "was turned into a weapon against her own father. The real criminal here is the woman who used a 9-year-old's pain for her own revenge." The prosecution's turn came, and Morrison was brilliant. He systematically destroyed the email evidence, showing technical proof of forgery. But the damage was partially done. Doubt had been planted. Then Rachel was called to testify. She walked to the stand with perfect posture, her new dress, chosen by Stella, not as a prop but with love, making her look exactly what she was, a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "Rachel," Morrison began gently, "did Elisha Cuthbert coach you to destroy your father?" "No," Rachel said clearly. "Elisha didn't even know I was collecting evidence until the night of the first gala. She's never asked me to do anything except be a child, which is more than my father ever did." "Why did you collect all that evidence?" Rachel looked directly at the jury. "Because I was afraid. Afraid that one day he would kill me, maybe not physically, but spiritually. I needed protection. Evidence was my shield." That's a very mature thought for a 6-year-old. When you're raised by a predator, you learn to think like prey, always watching, always ready to run, always gathering resources for survival. Richardson stood for cross-examination, his smile sharp. "Miss Christensen, or should I say Miss Stella's ward now, you claim you were afraid of your father. Yet you lived with him for 9 years. Where else could I go? I was a child. You could have told someone." "I did. I told nannies who were fired for overstepping. I told teachers who were told I was imaginative. I told his business partners who laughed and said I'd understand when I was older. No one listens to children when money is involved. So you decided to destroy him instead. I decided to survive him. There's a difference." Richardson pulled out a tablet. "I have here your school records. Straight A's, perfect attendance, glowing teacher reviews, hardly the profile of an abused child." Rachel's composure finally cracked, but not in the way Richardson expected. She laughed, a sound too bitter for a 9-year-old. "You think abuse only looks like bruises and failing grades. Abuse can look like perfection, Mr. Richardson. It's the child who never makes mistakes because mistakes mean rage. It's the student who never misses school because school is safer than home. It's the girl who gets perfect grades because maybe if she's perfect enough, her father will finally see her as more than an inconvenience. She pulled out her own tablet, which Morrison quickly admitted as evidence. You want to see what abuse looks like? Here's my diary. Not written, video. 3 years of daily entries. The first video played. 6-year-old Rachel, hiding in her closet, whispering, "Daddy hit Elisha again. She tried to cover the bruise with makeup, but I saw. I wish I was brave enough to help her. I wish I was brave enough to help myself." Another entry, age 7. Father forgot my birthday again. Elisha tried to make a cake secretly, but he found out and threw it in the trash. Said celebrations make children soft. I saved one piece. It tasted like love. Age 8. Father says I'm getting too much like Elisha. He says it like it's bad. But Elisha is the only person who ever loved me, so maybe being like her means I'm capable of being loved. Maybe that's what he hates. The final entry, recorded just before the first gala. Tomorrow I start fighting back, not with fists or words, but with truth. Father taught me that information is power. Time to use his lessons against him. The courtroom was silent except for muffled sobs from the gallery. Those could be scripted, Richardson said desperately. Then how about this? Rachel pulled out a small box from her pocket. My father's hair, and mine. I had them tested at 3 different labs. She handed the results to Morrison. He's not my biological father. The courtroom exploded. Hayden jumped to his feet. That's impossible. You knew, Rachel said calmly. You've always known. That's why you never loved me. I was proof of Mother Elisha's life before you, proof you couldn't own her completely, but you kept me because I was useful, a prop for your image. Your Honor, Morrison said, we'd like to submit these DNA results as evidence of motive. Mr. Christensen wasn't just abusing his daughter, he was holding another man's child hostage for image management. That's not, Hayden was sputtering. You loved control, Rachel said quietly. And when you couldn't control Elisha anymore, you tried to control me. But here's the thing about trying to cage a phoenix. We're born from fire. You can't burn what's already been through hell. She looked at the jury. I'm not asking you to convict him because he was a bad father. I'm asking you to convict him because he's a criminal who happened to also be a bad father. The evidence is clear. The financial crimes, the bribery, the embezzlement, it's all there. I'm just the bonus proof that his cruelty had no limits. As she stepped down from the stand, she passed Hayden's table. He grabbed her wrist, not hard, but desperately. Rachel, please, you're all I have left. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his face. Number, I'm all you've lost. And you did it to yourself. She pulled free and walked to Elisha, who wrapped her in a fierce embrace. The trial continued for 3 more days. Witness after witness testified to Hayden's crimes. Business partners he'd cheated, officials he'd bribed, investors he'd defrauded. The evidence was overwhelming, but the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source, Scarlett. She took the stand on day 3, looking smaller than Rachel remembered. He told me his daughter was a burden, she testified. Said once we were married and had real children, he'd send her away. He had already picked out the school, a military academy in Serbia known for breaking difficult children. He laughed about it, laughed about destroying a 9-year-old spirit. Why are you testifying? The prosecutor asked. Because I was almost her, Scarlett said, looking at Rachel. Another woman he would have destroyed for sport. She saved me by showing me the truth. The least I can do is tell it. Chapter 10. The Phoenix's Revenge. The verdict was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday that would go down in Connecticut legal history. Rachel stood before the courthouse bathroom mirror, 9 years old, but carrying centuries in her eyes. Stella had braided her hair like Elisha used to. She wore a simple black dress with a phoenix pin, Grayson's gift. "Ready, baby girl?" Elisha asked. "I've been ready for 3 years." They walked together, Rachel, Elisha, Stella, and Grayson, a family forged by choice. The gallery was packed, media waiting, the city holding its breath. Chaos erupted as they reached the doors. Screams, security rushing inside. Hayden's voice unhinged. "You can't do this to me! I built this city!" They pushed through to find Hayden standing on the defense table, wielding a letter opener from his lawyer's briefcase, security surrounding him. "Rachel, Rachel, tell them you lied!" Rachel stepped forward, despite Stella's grasp. The courtroom fell silent. "Put the weapon down, Father." "Don't call me that! You're not mine!" "You're right. I never was. I'm Elisha's daughter in everything that matters. You're just a man holding a letter opener like a sword, thinking you're still king when your kingdom is ash. I'll destroy you all. I have friends. Money hidden. Actually, you don't." James Morrison entered with FBI agents and someone unexpected. William Christensen, Hayden's father, wheelchair-bound, but commanding. "I've been watching you destroy everything I built," William said. "Rachel showed me what I should have seen." He gestured to Morrison's folder. Swiss banks, Cayman accounts, 23 million stolen from investors and family trust. "Father, no, I disowned you this morning. Everything goes to a foundation for abused children, with Rachel and Stella as trustees. You get nothing." Hayden lunged at Rachel with the blade raised. Grayson stepped between them, taking the blade in his shoulder. Elisha struck Hayden's wrist with a bailiff's baton. The weapon flew. Rachel's voice echoed, "You have no power here." Security swarmed Hayden. Rachel pulled out her recorder. "Play this." Hayden's voice from 3 years ago filled the courtroom. "If you ever try to take Rachel, I'll kill you. I'll make it look like an accident. The child too, if necessary." Then Elisha's voice. "I'm recording this, Hayden." "No, you're not. I destroyed your phone." "Rachel is. She's been recording everything." His laugh. "She's 6 years old. And smarter than both of us. Someday she'll play this for the world." "That's why Elisha left without me," Rachel told the silent courtroom. "Not because she didn't love me, but to save us both. She left so I could survive. I survived to save us both." Judge Phillips spoke. "Mr. Christensen, you're charged with attempted assault with a deadly weapon. Remove him to psychiatric holding." As they dragged him away, Hayden found Rachel's eyes. She saw recognition, understanding of what he'd destroyed. "Rachel," he whispered. "Goodbye, Mr. Christensen." The doors closed. Rachel went to Grayson, being treated by paramedics. "You saved me, you saved yourself. You saved all of us." Judge Phillips rendered verdict in absentia. "Guilty on all 37 counts. Maximum sentence recommended." Morrison's phone rang. His face paled. "Hayden attempted escape during transport. He's being transferred to secure psychiatric facility. He can't hurt anyone anymore." Rachel felt 3 years of tension release. Later, in Stella's living room, William Christensen sat with them. "I failed him, taught him power over people." "You gave him tools," Rachel corrected. "He chose how to use them. We all have choices." William studied her. "You're remarkable. I have his intelligence, his strategic mind, but also Elisha's heart, Stella's strength, and my choice to protect instead of destroy." "The foundation," William said, producing documents, 23 million, your name on everything. "The Phoenix Foundation," Rachel said, "for children rising from ashes." Elisha knelt beside her. "Baby girl, about your biological father. Marcus Thompson died in Afghanistan before you knew you were pregnant. Hayden knew. He married you to own something beautiful." Through tears, Elisha asked, "Would you let me adopt you?" "Officially, yes." Rachel looked at Stella. "Co-guardians?" "Perfect. Children can't have too many people who love them." Grayson, arm in sling, pulled out a ring box. "Elisha Cuthbert, you've shown me strength and grace coexist, that phoenixes are real. Would you—" "Yes!" This was Rachel's real revenge, building family from ruins, finding love where he'd sown hate. 6 months later, the Phoenix Foundation's first gala was held where Hayden had first humiliated Elisha. "My name is Rachel Phoenix Cuthbert Whitmore," she announced from the podium. "I'm 10 years old, and I'm a survivor." She addressed the audience, dignitaries, donors, children the foundation had helped. "People ask if I forgive him. The man in psychiatric prison for life. Number forgiveness is for those who change. He sought only control." She held Hayden's last letter over a candle, letting it burn. "But I don't carry hatred. That would give him power." The ashes fell. He's nothing now. Not father, not enemy, not even a memory worth keeping. The Phoenix Foundation isn't about revenge. It's about resurrection, taking the worst thing that happened and transforming it into power to help others. She looked at Amy, 7 years old, whose story echoed hers. "To every child told they're worthless, treated like property, you are phoenixes. You will rise." The applause was deafening. Rachel heard chains breaking, cages opening. Elisha embraced her. "I'm so proud, baby girl." "Mom," Rachel said, "we're free." In a psychiatric facility, Hayden sat in a padded room, talking to shadows about his empire. His words meant nothing. He'd become what he'd always feared, irrelevant. In a ballroom full of light, a 10-year-old girl stood tall, surrounded by chosen family, proof that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming everything your abuser said you'd never be. Rachel Phoenix Cuthbert Whitmore looked at her family, her foundation, her future spreading like wings. She hadn't just survived, she had won. The phoenix had risen. The daughter had her revenge, and it was perfect. Epilogue. 5 years later. Rachel stood before the congressional hearing, 15 years old but carrying herself with the gravity of someone who'd seen too much and chosen to transform it into purpose. "Senator, you ask why a 15-year-old should be heard on matters of child protection law. I answer, because I survived what your current laws failed to prevent, because I have the scars, physical and emotional, that your indifference allowed. And because the Phoenix Foundation has helped 3,000 children escape situations your system ignored." She placed a thick folder on the table. "These are their stories. Children failed by laws that prioritize biological rights over safety, wealth over welfare, appearance over truth." The senator shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Cuthbert Whitmore, surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm suggesting exactly what you think I'm suggesting," Rachel interrupted calmly. "That money and power have insulated abusers for too long, that children's voices are dismissed until tragedy makes them impossible to ignore, that my biological father sat on committees like this one while terrorizing his family at home." She looked directly at the cameras broadcasting the hearing nationally. "Hayden Christensen died last year in psychiatric custody, alone and unmourned, but there are thousands of Hayden Christensens still out there, hiding behind respectability while destroying the children they claim to own. This bill, Rachel's Law, as the media has named it, will give children the right to seek protective separation without requiring physical evidence of abuse. It acknowledges that emotional terrorism leaves no bruises but kills souls just the same." "The cost," another senator began. "The cost of prevention is always less than the cost of damage," Rachel said firmly. "I should know. The therapy, the trials, the years of recovery, they cost far more than early intervention would have. But more than money, consider the cost in human potential. How many children like me never get the chance to rise? How many phoenixes die in their ashes because no one gives them wings?" She stood, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "I was lucky. I had Elisha, who loved me despite the danger. I had Stella, who gave me sanctuary. I had Grayson, who showed me that masculine strength doesn't require cruelty. I had resources, intelligence, and frankly, exceptional circumstances that allowed me to orchestrate my own rescue. Her voice hardened. But children shouldn't need to be exceptional to be saved. They shouldn't need to be strategic masterminds at age 6, evidence collectors at 7, and courtroom warriors at 9. They should just need to be children asking for help. She pulled out a photo, herself at 9, standing in the courtroom the day Hayden was convicted. This little girl saved herself because the system wouldn't. How many more are out there waiting for rescue that never comes? Pass this bill. Give them the wings the law currently denies them. Let them rise. The hearing room erupted in applause from the gallery, survivors, advocates, and parents who understood. The senators looked uncomfortable, aware that opposing this bill would be political suicide after Rachel's testimony went viral, which it would within hours. As Rachel left the stand, she was met by her family, Elisha and Grayson with their 2-year-old son, Marcus, named for Rachel's biological father, Stella with her partner Diana, and William, now 88, and proud of the legacy Rachel had built from his family's ashes. "How did it go?" Elisha asked, though her proud smile said she already knew. "They'll pass it," Rachel said confidently. "They have no choice. I made sure of that." "Still playing chess while everyone else plays checkers?" Grayson teased gently. "Someone has to," Rachel replied, but her smile was warm. "Besides, I learned from the best worst example. Hayden taught me that power without purpose is poison, so I choose purpose with power instead." Little Marcus reached for his big sister, and Rachel lifted him easily, this child who would never know the fear she'd known, who would grow up surrounded by the love she'd had to fight to find. "Story?" he asked hopefully. "Later, little Phoenix," she promised. "Right now, we have work to do." As they walked out of the Capitol building into the bright Washington sunshine, Rachel felt the weight of her past and the lightness of her future in perfect balance. She was no longer the scared child collecting evidence in secret. She was no longer the warrior child facing down a monster in court. She was Rachel Phoenix Cuthbert Whitmore, survivor, advocate, daughter, sister, and proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living with purpose, with love, with the determination to ensure no other child faces what you faced alone. The Phoenix had risen, the daughter had her revenge, and she was using it to light the way for others to rise. The cycle of abuse had ended, the cycle of resurrection had begun, and it was beautiful. The end. This story is dedicated to every child who has had to be their own hero, to every survivor who chose to rise rather than revenge, and to every adult who stands between a child and harm. You are all phoenixes. You all deserve to soar.